be waiting. We'll just see as people come in. I'm hoping people are familiar with the whole Zoom technology, because it certainly changed the way we do events nowadays. And I've done quite a lot of events now through Zoom, and I see people are coming in. Thank you very much for joining us. We've got that's great. We've got quite a few people coming in at the moment. You're very welcome. We've got quite a lot of people coming today, so we're going to give it a few minutes to let people come on board. But certainly my business has changed because, well, we did your event back in February.
Yeah, that was kind of just, it was the end of February.
Yeah, and that was sort of towards the end of the live events that I did. Mind you, I did get a few more done in the end of February. But so now we're getting used to doing everything this way. And I think it can be very effective as well. I mean, it's...
I mean, I think it works for people, and I've used a few different platforms. I did one last week for a company in the UK, and they used a completely different platform. And it worked very nicely. For me, the hard part is, though, I can't see my audience. And that's, you know, I can't use that, because normally you can see people's faces, whether they've, you know,
and you bounce off your audience, don't you? I mean, that's the thing.
Completely. And you decide whether you want to go a bit further on something or pull back on that. You know, you really, normally I completely gauge, you know, you can see by an audience, oh, that's really trigged their interest, I'll go further down that avenue, or they seem to already know that and I've got that, I'll move on. Whereas with this, I can't see people, so you just have to kind of, Well,
there is a chat box and a question and answer box. We've got 22 people in so far.
I see that.
You're all very welcome. If you have questions, feed them in through the chat box or the Q&A box. But well, you can do it at any point, but we will be dealing with the questions after the presentation. So, and I will be feeding the questions through to Sabina. So we're just going to give, and any of you who've got colleagues who've booked with somebody and who has not been able to make it today, I've asked you to share the link with your colleague who, you know, is part of your booking. And I will send the recording to you after the event so that you will have access to it. It'll be an iCloud recording, and it'll be valid for about 30 days. So you'll be able to watch it at your own leisure after this. And you can pass that on to anybody, and I will send it on to everybody who's actually booked through me, who's not able to be here today. So I could probably start. I think I was just going to introduce Sabina. I know there are some people who were meant to come to the April seminar, and we had to postpone that. And then we had a May date, and we postponed that. And finally, the September date, we decided to do it like this, because we were informed by the venue we could only have 6 people in the venue. Even though weddings can have 50 people, we were told that only 6 people. So this was the best solution for us. So please bear with us. I hope you will enjoy this, doing it online. And who knows, maybe you might even find it easier. I don't know. I certainly quite enjoy it because there's no commuting and there's no checking people in, and it does seem to work very, very well in my case anyway. And also, Sabina, what I'm going to do, we're going to obviously do this based on your book 100 Days to a Younger Brain, but I'd like to do something in the future with you also on perhaps dementia or ageism. And we might do something
ageism, yes, absolutely, yeah. That's one of my
very big subject nowadays.
Yes, that is one. Yeah, it's one of my favorite topics. Yeah.
So we might post that a bit later.
Yes.
Okay, we've got fairly good number now, and it's 2 minutes past 7. I will introduce Sabina. Now, I would highly recommend her website, superbrain.ie. There's a huge amount of resources on that. There's short films, there's podcasts, there's animations, and also it talks about her books and her as well. So I really recommend that, superbrain.ie. You'll get a lot out of that. This seminar is entitled 100 Days to a Younger Brain, which is based on her book. Maximize your memory, boost your brain health, and defy dementia. And it'll give you easy tips and exercises to assess your brain health, improve your memory, protect your brain from cognitive decline, and slow the effects of dementia. Sabina is a research psychologist and an award-winning science communicator. She was doing research in the Neuroscience department in Trinity, but of course that's all slowed down now because of COVID. But she's done quite a few research papers, and she's written a few books, which again you'll see on the website. She's absolutely passionate about the brain and human behavior, and gives talks all over the world on a lot of different topics. And I know, because I've done an event with her before, she's passionate, inspirational, and entertaining. And she's also often on the radio as well, I gather. So I think I'll hand over to you now, Sabina, to start your talk, and I'll be here. And as I say to everybody, you can feed questions through to me, and then we'll allow a period at the end of the presentation to actually answer the questions. So please welcome Dr. Sabina Brennan.
We have to pretend people are clapping. Welcome to my living room. I should warn you, if you hear any strange noises around me, I don't have young children, but I do have 4 dogs. And they have just asked, they started banging on the door, so I figured it was better just let them be here with me, otherwise they could start rapping away at the door. Now I have to do the little technical part of sharing my screen with you. Is that okay? You can tell me, Jane?
Yep,
yes?
that's good. Yep.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so yes, at this point, I'm trying to adapt to how I used to give my talks, because I liked to give interactive talks. And I would start off by asking people a question. So you can kind of answer it at home. It's really just a question to get you to start thinking a little. I would ask normally, if, you know, hands up if you brushed your teeth this morning, and I'm going to pretend every one of you has put your hands up. Yes, there you go, Jane. And then I would say, you know, hands up if you intend brushing them again this evening, and pretty much everybody would keep their hands up, except some really honest souls put their hands down, which I always find rather endearing. And then I would say, keep your hands up if you consciously did something for your brain health today. And that's where you get the big, well, yes, Jane has her hands up, but actually, generally speaking, what happens is the vast majority of hands come down. And it just illustrates my point, you know, that while dental health is super important, because you need your teeth to speak, to smile, and to eat, you need your brain for everything. There isn't one thing that you can do without your brain. You can't sit upright. You certainly can't log into a Zoom session. You can't brush your teeth without your brain. There isn't anything you can do without your brain. And most of us don't consciously incorporate something, you know, to boost our brain health every day. We generally don't even speak of it. Thankfully, you know, we're thinking more about our physical health and our mental health. It's just the brain health bit hasn't quite come into the equation. And I would argue, actually, if you look after your brain health, your physical health and your mental health will actually automatically follow. Now, you're obviously really, really smart children, because you learned about a complex concept called investment at a very, very young age. Time spent now investing in a particular activity every day, brushing your teeth, reaps future benefits. And dental health, investing in dental health is a very long-term investment. You know, you start when your baby teeth come through, and you don't really reap the rewards until much later in life. You know, as you get a little older, you learn that if you engage in other activities like flossing, visiting your dentist regularly, avoiding sugary drinks, that, you know, you'll do even better. You'll hold on to your teeth for longer. You'll minimize tooth decay and tooth pain. But then when you become an adult, you realize that even if you fastidiously follow your dentist's advice, it doesn't come with an absolute guarantee. Basically, you know, as you get older, you know, like me, unfortunately, and thankfully after lockdown lifted, I cracked a tooth. So on one side of one of my teeth came off, dreadful, but at least I was able to get to a dentist. I didn't have to sit for 2 or 3 months feeling that horrible broken sensation inside my tooth. But I still know, even though that's starting to happen, I still know that my teeth are in a much better condition than they would have been if I didn't invest in a daily habit. And we now know that the same applies really to brain health. We know that there's things that you can do each and every day that increase the likelihood that you can hold on to important functions like memory in later life and for as long as possible. But just like dental health, it doesn't come with an absolute guarantee. But again, you will be in a better position than you would have been if you didn't invest in looking after your brain health. So why brain health? Well, the thing is, your brain is constantly changing. And it's your behaviors, your experiences, and the life choices that you make each and every day that shape it, and that can shape it at any age. What you do, and actually just as importantly, what you don't do, influences how well your brain will function when faced with challenge. And that challenge, it can take the form of aging or injury, or diseases, diseases that occur early in life, like multiple sclerosis, other diseases that affect the brain, like dementia and Alzheimer's disease, but actually also even what we're dealing with at the moment, COVID. You have a more resilient brain will help you to fare better in the face of disease. And actually, I've just done a special episode of my podcast on what COVID-19 is doing to our brains. And there's quite a significant cohort of people who are having ongoing brain complications as a consequence of mild and moderate COVID, so not necessarily the severe COVID. Anyway, I believe that adopting a brain healthy lifestyle is like investing in brain capital. It not only optimizes your brain function in the here and now, but it helps you to build reserves that you can cash in at some point in the future to compensate for disease, for brain damage, or for the decline that we often see with aging. Now, the disease that people are generally most concerned about when it comes to talking about the brain is dementia. And unfortunately, their fears aren't unfounded. Globally, there are currently about 50 million people living with dementia. In Ireland, we have about 55,000 people. And that figure is set to treble by 2050. Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of dementia, and that makes up about 34 million of the 50 million people who have. The others will have different types of dementia: frontal lobe dementia, mixed dementias, Lewy body dementias, but Alzheimer's disease is the most common. And Alzheimer's disease is the disease on which most of the research has been done. So anything that we talk about when we're talking about dementia in terms of research is generally in populations who have had Alzheimer's disease. 1 in 3 people born today will develop dementia in later life if we don't find a cure, or if we don't find a way to prevent it. It's very depressing, I know, but there is currently no cure, and so we must focus on prevention. It's absolutely key, it's critical. Now, the good news is that 40% of all cases of Alzheimer's disease are attributable to 12 modifiable risk factors. So that's things that you and I can do each and every day that can help to reduce our risk of developing dementia and also improve our prognosis even if we do develop the pathology in our brain. So those risk factors, age, obviously for the most part, and when I'm talking about Alzheimer's disease, I'm talking about late onset Alzheimer's disease. There is an early onset Alzheimer's disease, but that really is a different and separate beast in a sense. So I'm talking about the late onset. And these are the modifiable risk factors. Age is your biggest risk factor. It is a disease of old age. But there are plenty of other modifiable factors which gives hope. There's things that you can do to help reduce your risk and keep your brain healthy. So there's the cardiovascular risk factors, the things to do with your heart. Type 2 diabetes increases your risk of developing dementia. So we know that that's something that is very much linked to the kind of lifestyle that you have. Midlife high blood pressure increases your risk of developing dementia, as does midlife obesity. Now in later life, that actually flips, and being underweight in later life becomes a risk factor. So being a good healthy weight is really what you need to aspire to. Smoking is really bad for your brain. It's bad for every part of your body, and if it doesn't kill you, it increases your risk of developing dementia. And more recently, there's been a couple of these risk factors have been added only very recently in the Lancet. Actually, it was only just this summer. They added three risk factors to bring this up to 12 risk factors, and air pollution is one of those. So that's something that we need to really consider. Physical inactivity and low levels of education. And I will be talking about both of those in much greater depth when I'm giving some tips as to how you can keep your brain healthy. Here I just want to outline the risk factors. Depression increases your risk. And there's a complicated relationship between depression and dementia. It certainly indicates that it's a risk factor for dementia, but it's also possible that it could be an early sign of dementia. So it's not fully understood, but it would be key that if you experience depression, to go and get it treated as soon as possible, because it has knock-on effects that may lead you into engaging in behaviors that are not healthy for your brain. Such as actually social isolation, and I'll be talking about that in greater detail later on. And hearing loss, excuse me. We actually published a paper ourselves, a review paper on hearing loss and the link with developing cognitive impairment and dementia in later life. And none of us, I mean, we're all very vain, but we will wear glasses when we need to wear glasses, you know, because we can't function without them. But there's still a stigma associated with wearing a hearing aid, and people put it off and put it off. If you take anything away from today, if you are experiencing any sort of hearing loss, go get yourself properly tested, get the hearing aids. They've fantastic ones now. You can't see them. There's apps on your phone. You can switch certain people off and they don't even know you're not listening to them, but you can adjust sound on your television, you know, to make compensate for, because we lose hearing from different zones of our hearing. Zone is not the right word, but from different levels of our hearing. So yes, it's really important. And also there is some evidence to suggest that the earlier you get a hearing aid, the less, you know, it helps slow the progression of hearing loss. Excessive alcohol consumption, more than 21 units a week, is what the Lancet papers says, but there is plenty of other data that suggests that consumption of any form of alcohol will actually impair your cognitive functioning, not necessarily increase your risk of developing dementia, but impair your functioning. And then a midlife brain injury also increases risk. And I think included in there are various types of brain injury. It's not just accidental, you know, you can have a deprivation of oxygen. You know, a lot of people actually who've been hospitalized with COVID, you know, they may have mild brain injury as a consequence of being on a ventilator, you know, they're deprived of oxygen, and those kind of things can happen. Now, I just want to show you, I'm not really very fond of this particular image, but it is a slice of the human brain. The one on my left, as you look at the screen, which I presume actually now on a screen is the exact same rather than it being behind me. That's a fatty, healthy brain. The one on the right is a shriveled, atrophied brain, of someone with Alzheimer's disease. So it's not hard to see how the brain malfunctions, how you have Alzheimer's dementia, excuse me, as a consequence of such incredible loss. The brain can't possibly work properly or as it did before. This is an image of the brain that most of you are probably, you know, if I say the brain and say think of a brain, that's probably what pops into your head. It's not my favorite image. I think it kind of belies, it looks sort of dead. It looks sort of, it just looks like, you know, I don't know, it's not very pretty. It looks like a bunch of sausages put in your face. And actually the texture is a bit like soft meat, but yeah, it really belies its brilliance. I prefer, you know, when talking about the brain and when thinking about the brain, to consider these kind of images. These are these are images of neurons, individual brain cells that have been stained using a particular protein dye. And each of those lines you see coming out of them are the communication cables that allow them to communicate with other brain cells and other cells in the rest of your body. You've got 86 billion of those in your brain. And as you're sitting here listening to me, they are firing and talking to each other and to the rest of your body using electrical and chemical signals. So you have billions of brain cells and trillions of connections coming out of them. Really an incredible organ. This is an image from Diffusion tensor imaging, and it just gives you a sense. I think this is more what a brain really is like. This just gives you a sense of the communication tracks in the brain, and that's what I would rather that, you know, you think of when you're thinking of the brain. And I would also suggest maybe after the talk, just to Google the word brainbow, and you'll see lots of these images. They're absolutely amazing to look at. But anyway, for now, to illustrate my next point, I have to go back to this horrible flat slide. Clearly, these are, I used to play, I'm very mean in my talks, and I used to play a spot the difference between these two brains, but that's the whole point. There is no difference. And they are clearly not slices from a healthy brain. It's a very atrophied brain. But that's the point that I want to make. Basically, back in 1986, a researcher called Katzman was trying to understand the difference between you know, an older person's healthy brain and the brain of an older person who has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. So he was looking at their brains post-mortem. He was looking at the brains of individuals who had a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease in a nursing home. And then he had a control group of individuals from a nursing home who had no diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. And he made a really exciting discovery that, you know, has spawned incredible research since then, and the area of research that I work in, that I'm interested in. So in his control group, he found 10 cases of cognitively normal adults who had sufficient pathology, sufficient Alzheimer's disease in their brain for a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, but they had no symptoms. For some reason, their brains were resilient. And that spawned this whole area of research to try and understand, well, what is it about these individuals that they could have the disease in their brain, but not have the dementia? And we've started in recent years to distinguish now between Alzheimer's disease and Alzheimer's dementia, because you can have the disease in your brain and not have the dementia. And living a brain healthy life is one of the ways that that can happen. But I have to say, you know, it's not a complete get out of jail free card. Had these individuals gone on to live longer, they ultimately would have developed Alzheimer's dementia, but they would have had more years in possession of their full faculties before those symptoms manifest. So that's part of the aim of living a brain healthy life. It's to reduce your risk of developing dementia, you know, in the context of dementia. And it is also to build a resilience so that should you get a disease that impacts on your cognitive function or your brain, you have a better chance of holding on to your memory, your attention, your ability to plan, organize, all those things that make us very human. So we call this resilience in the area of research that I work in, we call it reserve. And it comes from a repeated observation by clinicians that there's no direct relationship between the degree of brain injury or brain disease and the clinical manifestations of that injury or disease. So two people can sustain a stroke of the same magnitude, and one individual can have severe impairment to their functioning and another individual has minimal impairment. So this individual with the minimal impairment, we say has high reserve. They've been able to absorb the damage without having, severe impairment to their functioning. They've been able to continue functioning. They still have the same amount of damage. So essentially, if the individual has low reserve after having a stroke, has severe damage, if they're lucky, go into our rehabilitation hospital and someone will work with them to try and get an area adjacent to the damaged area to take over the functioning of the area that's been damaged by the stroke and rehabilitate them. Now, the thing is, if you've got reserves, your brain already has the capacity to do that. It is able to recruit other areas of the brain when it's faced with challenge. And I'll explain a little bit more about that as we go through the talk about how you can build up that reserve. What I'm going to do here is, this resilience we know is linked to lifestyle factors, and many of them are similar, the converse of the lifestyle factors that we know infer risk. So I'm going to show you a little animation. If my slide, there we go, wasn't moving forward for a second. As Jane mentioned earlier, I like to explain science using animation, and if you do visit that website, on the bottom of the page are links out to all the various animations and brain health materials that I've developed, and they're all available free online. So I'm just going to play this one for you.
We all know people who are really resilient, people who keep on keeping on no matter what life throws at them. Well, our brain has the capacity for resilience too, provided we give it a helping hand by living a brain healthy lifestyle. For example, when a disease like multiple sclerosis strikes, it attacks brain and spinal cord tissue, causing communication problems within the central nervous system that can lead to physical, visual, or cognitive impairments. We know that some people with multiple sclerosis can tolerate more disease pathology than others while still retaining cognitive function. Scientists believe that their resilience in the face of disease pathology is linked to certain life exposures. Here's how they think it works. The brain has an inbuilt but finite resource called neurological reserve. This reserve allows the brain to retain function by reorganizing itself to compensate for brain atrophy and lesions. It reroutes communication pathways to avoid damaged areas and adapts undamaged areas to take on functions of areas affected by disease. This really is pretty fantastic, but unfortunately, it just can't keep pace with disease activity. Eventually, neurological reserve is exhausted and cognitive deficits become apparent. But that's not the end of the story. Neurological reserve has two components. Brain reserve, which refers to the size of the brain, and cognitive reserve, which is the ability to actively compensate and to make more effective and efficient use of brain networks. Our lifetime experiences can increase cognitive reserve and help to maintain brain reserves. This gives us a better chance to hang on to cognitive function if life throws us a curveball in the shape of a disease or injury. All other things being equal, people with multiple sclerosis with high cognitive reserve lose less cognitive function than those with less cognitive reserve for the same amount of brain pathology. So, give your brain a helping hand by maximizing your brain. It's like giving your neurological reserves a new lease of life.
Okay, so there's one other thing I just want to tell you about in terms of cognitive reserve, this to just illustrate it a little bit more, and that is a study called the Bronx Healthy Aging Study. Now, if you recall earlier when I was talking about the risk factors, one of the risk factors for dementia is low levels of education. And that when that kind of became apparent, you can see how it was, you know, one of those things where you go, oh my gosh, what do? You know, people are now in their, you know, 70s or whatever, and they left school at 12, you know, are they scuppered completely? But we also know that that reserve is linked to engaging in mentally stimulating activities. So this particular study wanted to look at the relationship between education level and engaging in cognitively stimulating activities. So they followed 488 adults who were all over 70, I think, at the start of the study. And they followed them for 5 years. Over the course of 5 years, 101 of them actually developed dementia. Now, like if you were doing a study where it was, you know, looking at the efficacy of a particular medication or drug, you know, you'd be looking at the dose, 1 tablet 3 times a day or whatever. So in this instance, they were looking at the impact of engaging in mentally stimulating activities. I have them listed there on the screen. They're what, you know, you'd call hobbies. Nothing, there's no rocket science in there. And basically the dose was engaging in one of those activities for 1 day per week. And in the individuals who had the diagnosis of dementia, they found that engaging in one activity for 1 day per week delayed the onset of rapid memory loss for 2 months. So that's a pretty incredible payoff. And the really exciting thing was that positive effect was independent of education level. So it didn't matter what age those people left school at. What actually mattered was that they were continuing to engage in stimulating activities in later life. So before I go on to giving you tips about how to keep your brain healthy, I just wanted to introduce another, and some of you may already be very familiar with this. I can't see from your faces, so I just have to go and talk about it, is neuroplasticity. So the brain is flexible, it's adaptable, it can change, and it can reorganize itself by making new connections between neurons. And that's what we call neuroplasticity. Now, it occurs at 3 key points throughout our lives. As babies, we're born with a very immature brain. It's really incomplete. So neuroplasticity happens at the beginning of life as our immature brain organizes itself and creates new connections, you know, and that's why it's so important to actually stimulate young children and babies. And sitting them in front of a screen with an iPad is not stimulating their brains at all. Anyway, that's a whole other conversation. Then it also occurs anytime you sustain a brain injury to compensate for lost function. Your brain has the capacity to grow new connections to maximize remaining function. And then the other time it happens is in adulthood, anytime something new is learned or memorized. So neuroplasticity gives us the capacity to grow. Remember that slide that looks like a Monet painting with all our neurons and all those connections coming out of them? Well, if we continue to engage in learning things and exposing ourselves to novel experiences, that's what neuroplasticity is. And that means we can grow more of those new connections. And really what you want is really dense connections. You want lots and lots and lots of them, because they will make your brain not only work better and possibly even faster, but they will provide you protection should you be faced with a challenge such as dementia. So basically, neuroplasticity just describes the brain's ability to change with learning. So here's another little animation I'm going to show you that will introduce sort of the next section, which is what you can do to keep your brain healthy.
To keep your brain healthy. We all know high cholesterol isn't good for our bodies, along with high blood pressure and being overweight. But what you might not know is that not only can these health concerns shorten the life of your body, they can affect your brain function. The more scientists study our brains, the more they're finding that how well it works is intricately tied to the health of our body. For example, just 30 minutes of aerobic exercise 5 times a week can keep your brain sharp. Because physical exercise not only helps your heart, it can increase the size of your hippocampus, a part of the brain crucial to making memories. But that's not all. Physical exercise generates a chemical called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which acts like fertilizer for the brain, encouraging the growth of neural connections and new brain cells. So, obviously staying active is important, but not just physically active. You need to keep socially active as well, especially as you get older. Because there's growing evidence to suggest that people who can avoid getting lonely reduce their risk of cognitive decline, something we all agree is a good thing. But there's one last thing you need to do to keep your brain healthy. Keep it active. So, in no particular order, here are 3 top ways to keep your brain stimulated. Number 1, challenge yourself. The satisfaction you get from doing things slightly beyond your comfort zone actually changes your brain chemistry, making you feel more positive. Number 2, change yourself. Novelty helps your brain, so it's good to experience new things, take on new situations and meet new people. And number 3, learn something new. This encourages the growth of new brain cells and stimulates the connections between them, which has its own benefits, because stronger brain connections also help keep your brain healthy. So don't let age stop you from doing the things you love. Think young, because if you look after your brain now, keeping it active and engaged, it will make you proud for years to come.
So these are what I call my brain health hacks. And I basically divide them into 3 strands: activity, attitude, and lifestyle. So I've touched on those in the little animation. So people are often surprised, you know, when I give these talks in person, when there's other human beings in the room, you know, they often chat to me, you know, before we start talking, and they say, oh, I do, you know, Sudoku and puzzles, and, you know, they think about the brain as sort of, you know, needing cerebral activity, which it does, of course, but actually one of the best things that you can do for your brain health is to get physically active and to remain physically active. And this is because your brain needs a really good supply of nutrients and oxygen. It only weighs about 2% of your body weight, but it consumes about 25% of all the nutrients circulating at any one time. So it needs a really healthy cardiovascular system to ensure that it gets the nutrients that it needs. So we know from research that physical activity has a direct benefit on both the structure of the brain and also how it functions. And I often say if I'm giving talks and I'm say referring to students, you know, who might be studying for an exam, and I'd say, look, you know, instead of plowing through after lunch to study when you're feeling that, you know, that afternoon drop in arousal, and you know, go for a run. Because actually it will, you know, increase your arousal levels and actually allow you to take more information and enhance your ability to learn new information. And of course, physical inactivity is associated with increased risk of cardiovascular disease. And from my very first slide, you know, cardiovascular health is, you know, having high blood pressure and being overweight, etc. They all impact on how your heart functions. So it's really important to have a healthy cardiovascular system. But it's not just that. It's not just, you know, that you get this, that your brain can take advantage of the oxygen and nutrients that a healthy cardiovascular system and a fit body provides. When you exercise, certain hormones are released that can create a nourishing environment in your brain that actually promotes the the growth of new brain cells, and you want as many brain cells as possible. You want that fat, fit, healthy brain. It's the one part of our body, women, that we can say, yes, yes, bigger is better. And it also actually stimulates neuroplasticity. So it actually increases the release of a growth factor called BDNF, which makes it easier for the brain to grow new connections. So in my book, I call it Miracle Grow for the brain, but it is like that. It's like a fertilizer, and you get that when you exercise. We know physical exercise is associated with better cognitive function and with increased activity in brain cells that are particularly associated with attention. And as we get older, we get a little bit more absent-minded. So anything that can boost our attention is really good. And attention is also the first step in the memory-making process. So, if any of you listening sort of are, have any sort of concerns that your memory might be failing, or, you find yourself forgetting where you put things, etc. It may well be that what you're having is failures of attention. You're not paying attention to, for example, where you put your keys when you come in the evening. And if you haven't attended to where you put something, you can't encode a memory. If you haven't encoded a memory, it can't be consolidated and you can't recall it. So attention is actually really critical for day-to-day memory. Physical exercise, of course, is also associated with reduced levels of stress, depression, and anxiety. So it's good for your brain health because it's good for your mental health. And of course, obviously, depression is a risk factor for dementia. So anything that can minimize that is good. So the next, and what I just want to go back a second to the physical activity. So most of us, when we think about physical activity, we're thinking about aerobic activity. We're thinking about walking, jogging, playing tennis, all those sorts of things. That is really important, and yes, you need to do that, but you also need to do strength bearing exercises and balance exercises, and there's a couple of reasons for that. You need to try and maintain good muscle tone, because in doing so, believe it or not, you make it less likely that you will fall. And unfortunately, as we get older, we have weaker muscles, our balance isn't as good as it was, and we're more likely to fall. And once you have one fall, you're more likely to have another fall, and unfortunately, falls also increase your risk of developing dementia. So anything that you can do to prevent yourself from falling is really good. So good muscle tone, and also working on your balance every day. And that's very simply, doing something like, standing on one foot. And I'm actually doing that at the moment, but you can't see because you can only see from here up. But old habits die hard. I usually give that whole section when I'm giving a talk, standing on one foot. So staying social is one of the most critical things, and it's something that has concerned me hugely during the pandemic. The blanket orders for over 70s to stay at home was the worst case of ageism I have come across. Yes, we absolutely had to protect those people, and yes, it made sense to have a certain cocooning, but it should have included opportunities for social contact, for social connection, for actually going out. It should have been that we adapt the environment outside to make it safe for those people, because I heard some terrible stories of individuals who had no contact with people for weeks on end, and that was going to accelerate any cognitive decline they had, or anyway, that is again sort of another talk. But staying socially engaged is absolutely critical. We're social beings, social creatures. Engaging socially is a mentally stimulating activity. To have a conversation with someone, it requires multiple cognitive resources. You have to listen to what someone's saying, you have to interpret what they're saying, you have to make decisions about whether you believe what they're saying, you have to formulate your own answers and responses to that question. So it's a really stimulating activity. Plus, it's kind of enjoyable once you get out there and do that. But we know that people with more social ties, they live longer, they've got better health, they're less depressed, and they are less likely to develop cognitive impairment and dementia. Loneliness and social isolation, when it comes to detriment to your health, are equivalent to smoking and obesity. Loneliness is a killer. Now, if you've experienced loneliness, it just means that you're normal, you're human. But the thing about loneliness is it is just a signal, and I give a whole talk about this, so I have to be careful I don't go right down that track on it. But it is just a signal, like hunger is a signal to eat. Thirst is a signal to drink. Loneliness is a signal. We call them aversive signals because they're unpleasant. You want to do something to stop them, and it is a signal to tell you to get connected. And it's really important that you do that. This meta-analysis that I have on screen here, it brought together the data from 70 studies, which meant that there was, 3.4 million people. They were looking at only studies that were longitudinal, that had a time 1 and a time 2. The average time between those, time 1 and 2, was 7 years. They were looking at a very simple thing. They were looking at loneliness, social isolation, and people who lived alone. And they wanted to look at, then at follow-up, whether people were alive or dead, the impact that those things had on mortality. And what they found was people who were lonely, isolated, or living alone were between 26% and 32% more likely to be dead at follow-up. And this is not a study of old people. This is a study of all adults from the age of 18 upwards. And there's lots of reasons why that happens, and I kind of can't go into that today, but anyway, it's just really critical to stay connected. And just 10 minutes of social interaction can increase your brain's performance and boost your brain health. So the next activity is to go mental, and by that I really just mean mental stimulation. That learning that we were talking about, that you want to generate those new brain cells. You want to enrich the connections between your brain cells and the networks, and they have the capacity to open up routes that you can use to bypass damage. So when I was talking earlier about the stroke individual, the individual who had high reserves and who was able to sort of bounce back from the stroke, they have probably more connections in their brain so that they can bypass the damage caused by the stroke. And they will get that by constantly challenging their brain. It doesn't really matter what the specific activity is. People often associate learning with school and with academic pursuits. It doesn't have to be that. Anything that involves novelty, newness, learning. It can be musical, it can be woodwork, it can be a craft, it can be eating a different food because your brain has to taste that new food. It can be listening to a different genre of music because your brain has to work hard to learn how that music works. So anything, novelty, anything that involves learning, anything that challenges you, that pushes you beyond your comfort zone. You have to feel that challenge, because what happens at that point is, oversimplifying here, but different parts of your brain are responsible for different activities. We have language here, and we have motor movement here, and we have vision at the back, very broadly speaking. That's really oversimplifying. But when you engage in an activity, your brain has a certain amount of resources that it can devote to it, right? And you can do it, and it's grand, and you're fine. Now, if you push yourself to the next level, if it's that you're learning a musical instrument or even playing a blooming console game, if you push yourself to the next level, you have not got the resources in the part of the brain that normally engages in that activity. So in order to rise to that challenge, your brain has to recruit other areas to help do that activity. So the more you challenge yourself, the more your brain gets used to recruiting other areas to help and to take over that activity. Now think back to that stroke individual where I said the one who had low reserve goes and gets rehabilitation, and the occupational therapist is working with them to try and recruit areas of the brain to take over the activity of the damaged brain. Now, you're trying to do that after the fact. If you've been challenging your brain all along, as the individual who had the stroke with the high reserve has been doing, your brain already knows how to do that. So you're one step ahead of the posse. So challenge is critical. Newness, anything that pushes you beyond your comfort zone. It can be anything, hobbies, etc. And education can build, and I mean education in the broadest sense of it, just you're learning about stuff, things, crafts, anything, can build cognitive reserves at any point throughout your life. So it is really never too late. Lifestyle factors. Loving your heart is one of the best things you can do for your brain health too, because you need to make sure that this cardiovascular system is pumping the oxygen and nutrients that your brain needs. I don't need to tell you how to look after your heart. There's so much information out there. I think it's rather funny that there's so much information about looking after heart health and hardly any about looking after brain health, when the heart really is a pump that services the brain. But it is good that we're looking after our heart. So through exercise, maintaining a healthy weight, a balanced diet, and if you're looking for a good diet for your brain health, the Mediterranean diet is the best diet that you can go for. Lots of colourful fruit and vegetables, oily fish, nuts, olive oil, and it's a beautiful diet to eat. This is another animation that you'll find if you click through the resources, and it explains why high blood pressure is bad for your brain. There's one thing that you do when you leave here. If you've never had your blood pressure tested, go get it tested, and get it tested regularly, because it's just poorly managed high blood pressure that increases your risk of developing dementia. So you can manage blood pressure through lifestyle changes, or in some instances, if your doctor advises, you may need to take medication. But if you manage it, well, then you're going to minimize your risk, the risk associated with it. Balance is absolutely critical in all senses of the word. Your brain thrives on regularity. It has a really, really complex job to do, and it has to make incredible decisions on an ongoing basis on the fly, that if I want to wiggle my toe, it's got to make sure that the neurons in my brain that wiggle my toe have just the right amount of oxygen and nutrients that they need to wiggle your toe, you know. So it needs to have this constant supply available, and we make life very difficult for our brains by eating irregularly and by sleeping irregularly. So your brain can really benefit by you just being regular in those important things, eating regularly, drinking water regularly, sleeping regularly. It'll make the life of your internal organs and your brain much easier. But also then I mean balance in the broader sense in terms of our life. All work and no play, we've all heard that. It really isn't good for your brain health. It's not good for your mental health. It's not good for your stress levels. But all play and no challenge is not good for you either. And so it really is important to have that balance where you do push yourself. And I do think that there's a risk as we get older that we sort of coast along and we just, you know, we found a nice comfort zone, and, you know, we can just continue along on it. Also, to balance technology with nature, we spend an awful lot of our lives, and even more so now with the pandemic, you know, using technology. Nature is restorative, and it really is important to get out there. Myself and Jane were both just saying, I live near a beach, and so does she, and they were a lifesaver during lockdown. I think I saw an awful lot more people, you know, being out in nature, and I hope that continues, because it really does help balance. And then we do like to consume a lot of alcohol in this country, and I think our alcohol consumption rates went through the roof during the pandemic. It's not particularly good for your brain health, but if you are drinking alcohol, balance it with water. At least that will help in some way. Sleep is absolutely critical for your brain health, and a lot of people say to me, you know, they're struggling with sleep. And the World Health Organization actually has declared a sleep loss epidemic. Even since the 1980s, we are getting less and less and less sleep. I think about a third of all people, that's 1 in 3 people, are sleep deprived. Now, if you think about sleep, it is a time when we are incredibly vulnerable. So if you think from an evolutionary perspective, you know, why do we sleep when we could be, you know, killed easily, you know, while we're asleep? And we sleep because, and it has survived because it serves a purpose. We need sleep. Now we know ourselves we need sleep because we're tired and, you know, you want to restore it, but it actually, when you go to sleep, your brain doesn't go to sleep. It has lots and lots of work to do. So when you go to sleep, your brain actually, in the early part of the night, when you take in information, during the day, there's a part of your brain called the hippocampus, which is involved in learning and memory. It's also the part of the brain that is most critically damaged in Alzheimer's disease. It sort of acts like a temporary repository for the information you've taken during the day until you go asleep at night. And when you go asleep at night, that information, you've got to clear everything out of there so that you can take more information in tomorrow when you wake up. So then that information, what we see is electrical activity in the brain in the early part of the night between that hippocampus and your frontal lobes, which are like your executive controller. And we see some activity at the start of the night. And what we believe that activity is filtering. That the hippocampus is showing the information. Sorry, that's someone sending me a WhatsApp message, which is not good. At this point, I've just shut it down there so that we don't start getting a whole load of beeps. So actually, yes, so it's filtering. So basically, your hippocampus is transferring the information. Your frontal lobes are going, no, don't need to keep that, don't need to keep that. Oh, that's important to keep that. A little bit later in the night, then we see much more diffuse activity across networks in the brain. And that is those new memories, that new information being consolidated and embedded across the brain networks. Then as we go sleep through the night, when we come towards the early morning, when we have more REM sleep, the dream sleep, you know, when you have those funny dreams where there's a bit of something that happened today and, you know, something from your childhood and odd random things. Well, that's actually that new information being linked with previous knowledge, information, and memories that you have. So if you get a good night's sleep, which is about 8 hours, somewhere between 7 and 9 hours, it is important that it's not just the number of hours, it is the type of sleep. So you need your non-REM sleep, which is mainly at the early part of the night, and your REM sleep, which is mainly at the later part of the night, so that all of these activities can be engaged in. And if you're getting that kind of sleep regularly, you will be able to wake in the morning with solutions to problems, with insight, with creativity, with ideas, because your brain is able to take in information. It also means that the next day when you wake up, you're fresher and better able to take in new information. Also, one other thing that happens when you are asleep is your brain actually has to eliminate toxins. Your brain is a high energy organ and it produces an awful lot of metabolic waste, and it can't be you during the day and clean all the waste it produces. So it needs you to go asleep so that it can clear that waste away. And a buildup, some of that waste that's cleared is beta amyloid, a buildup of which is associated with Alzheimer's disease. So sleep is absolutely critical. So some tips on screen there about how to cherish sleep. They're what we call just good hygiene. It really is about going to bed and getting up at the same time every day, regardless of whether it's a weekend or whether you have a day off work. Physical activity will improve the quality of your sleep. So too will getting out in daylight for at least an hour a day. Light is actually really, really important. Managing stress, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. Make sure you have downtime before bed. A lot of us have got into this habit of, you know, watching TV, turning it off, and then going upstairs to bed. That's really not a good idea. Think about turning off, you know, the devices and those kind of things about an hour before you intend to go to bed, and engage in something that is much more relaxing and calming, even just reading or listening to music, something that allows your brain to sort of gradually shut down. Avoid the blue light within an hour of going to bed. I would also suggest starting to dim your lights in the evening time. Use lamps instead of overhead lights, etc., so that you're then you're working with your body's natural daylight cycle, which we've completely changed with electric light. So if you are having trouble sleeping, there's some really good tips. When it comes to napping, there's nothing wrong with a nap. There's good evidence to suggest that, you know, getting the bulk of your sleep at nighttime and then the rest of it in a nap is fine, provided that nap happens earlier in the day, you know, before about 3 o'clock. If you nap any later than that, you really are going to make it more difficult for you to go to sleep later on. So on the final section then, really we're talking about attitude. Managing stress is critical. Stress is not bad for you. You need the stress response to rise to the challenges that I was talking about in terms of keeping your brain healthy. So you need just the right amount of stress. You need to identify your own stress sweet spot. Chronic stress is the issue. Unfortunately, chronic stress actually damages the hippocampus, which is that part of your brain involved in memory, and it suppresses the growth of new brain cells there, and it suppresses neuroplasticity there. So it actually causes your hippocampus to decrease in size, and at the same time, chronic stress actually then causes your amygdala, which is the part of your brain that is involved in the stress response, your fear centers, causes those to ramp up, and neuroplasticity actually increases there. And so your amygdala gets even bigger and you become more stressed. So, and then of course that's linked with sleep. You get this cycle where you can't sleep and you become more stressed. So it really is important to, you know, take time to start to manage stress, and there's a few tips there on screen, and you'll be able to kind of look at these. I'm concerned that my time is sort of coming towards an end here, but again, the similar things: being physically active, but being realistic about what you can achieve, accepting the things that you cannot change, and identifying things that you can change, and then actually taking action to change them. Another one that I think is really important is being realistic about what you can actually achieve. We often set ourselves way too much to do and then feel disappointed or stressed because we can't get it all done. And then when I say be realistic, time what you can get done in a particular period of time, and then go, okay, it took me an hour to do that. Well then, you know, I need 5 hours to do X, Y, Z. But also be realistic about what those around you, particularly your loved ones, what they can do. Because that's often a source of stress, is that we have too high expectations for those around us and they make us stressed. Be positive. People who have positive self-perceptions of aging and live on average 7.5 years longer than those who have negative perceptions of aging. People who view aging in a negative way, over 50, they lose their mental sharpness. And one of the things that really concerns me is that if we apply, we're surrounded by negative aging stereotypes, and it's very easy to absorb them. You know, you walk into a shop and there's images everywhere telling people, women particularly, how not to look like me with wrinkles. You know, like it really is, it's everywhere. But unfortunately, if we apply negative stereotypes to ourselves, we can actually limit our roles and our expectations. So we think we're too old to go to university. We think we're too old to take up a new hobby or to exercise. All of these things that are absolutely critical for brain health. So you've just got to shut those all out. It's your life, it's your brain, it's your body. You are never too old to do any of those things. And I actually have a whole section in my book that refers to some amazing agers who've done incredible things, you know, starting at 75, 80, you know, going on to win medals or get degrees in university. And focus on the positive about getting older. We're happier. As we get older, actually older people are happier than middle-aged people and younger people. And yes, it does decrease in very late life towards the very end, but it never gets as bad as when we're in our 20s. So we're wiser and we're better at conflict resolution. Now, we may get a little bit slower in terms of our mental processing, but we're just as accurate as the younger people. It just takes us a little bit longer to get there. My final tip is to keep smiling. It's free. It boosts the growth of brain cells in your hippocampus. It releases feel-good hormones. It lowers your blood pressure. It boosts your immune function. It protects you against stress, anxiety, and depression. And even the simple act of smiling makes you feel happy, even if you're not. And it really is fake it until you make it, because you get all of those health benefits. So I prescribe smiling 5 times a day. Once when you get up first thing in the morning. It's a great way to start the day. Once last thing at night. It's a great way to end the day. I suggest that you share at least one smile with somebody else. It gets you out, it gets you engaging with other people, and it spreads the health benefits. And you can do whatever you want with the other two. On screen here is my book that you mentioned, which is 100 Days to a Younger Brain. I've given you all the tips. You can go away and work with those. You don't have to buy the book at all. They're all there free, and there's more information in my resources. What this book does is allows you to create your own bespoke brain health plan, because at the start of this talk, I asked you if you did anything consciously for your brain health, and consciously was a key word, because the chances are you're already doing lots of things that are good for your brain health, but there are probably other things that you really need to work on. So essentially what this book does is allows you to assess the current state of your brain health, see what you're doing right and what needs fixing, and you build up this profile that has assets and risks. And so you create a 100-day plan to build your minimize your risk factors and build your assets. And the plan literally just works like this. You focus on sleep, and then on managing stress, and you work through your particular plan, and then you work on building those habits into your life. It's very straightforward. My podcast, as I mentioned, is called Superbrain. I interview really interesting guests each week about surviving and thriving in life. I do that on Mondays. They're very entertaining, and I've been very fortunate with some great guests. And then on a Thursday, I give a little brain booster shot that is either a tip about brain health or explaining the neuroscience behind something that has come up in our conversation. And we're on season 2 already. We'd only, when I gave my first talk, we were just on season 1. And that's it. I'm happy to take questions. I think I went 3 minutes over.
Sabina, do you want to stop the sharing of your screen? So
yes.
we can see you and me.
Yes. I've done it dark now. Can you see me? Shall I turn on a light?
Well, maybe turn on a light. Yeah, you're a bit dark.
I shall come back in a minute.
Sure.
How's that?
That's better. That's fine.
No. That's
I love that presentation. It's very inspirational. Thank you very much. I love the smiling thing in particular, and what somebody said to me at some point, you can actually train yourself to smile even if you don't feel like it by putting a pencil in your mouth.
right. That's actually how they did the research.
Yeah.
That research study that showed that you get all of those benefits was done by, putting that pencil, and
automatically makes you feel happy.
It does. And, I think I sometimes say this in my talks, it did puzzle me for quite some time. How is the brain, that's supposed to be the most complex structure in the known universe, how is it fooled by a fake smile? And it really took me quite a while. And then I did have that moment of insight, and I realized it's because the brain is so clever. It has given us this really simple mechanism by which we can have those benefits, reduce our blood pressure. And I mean, laughter is absolutely critical as well. I didn't say that here, but it is nature's natural stress buster. And laughing actually lowers levels of cortisol. And I do think that's why we sometimes laugh at the oddest times, I've never been to a funeral where I didn't have some really good belly laughs. It's the strangest thing, but I think it is, an inbuilt mechanism that helps us release that stress when it really is, unbearable to a sense.
They say that in cancer wards are full of laughter.
Yes. And this is sidetracking, but there really is it is important, our behaviors shape our brains on an ongoing basis. And I think something that people forget is that thinking is a behavior. just like walking, eating, and you know you've got to eat healthily and you know you've got to walk, but you've got to think healthily, you know, and because it's a behavior and it is shaping your brain as well. And so with the cancer, you know, I mean, it really is, there people who think positively have better prognosis with cancer. This isn't about thinking smiley, smiley or anything like that. It is actually thinking about the positive possibilities, etc. And it impacts on things like your immune function.
Mm-hmm. We have some questions coming through. Geraldine raised her hand, but she didn't send me a question. So I'm just going to take the written. Geraldine, if you could just write it, that'd be easier to do it that way rather than have people talk. Neil S. says, thank you very much. Mary Keane says, you're a tonic, Sabrina.
Okay.
I too am incensed with society's ageism, but I don't let it affect me. At 72, I'm completing an MS, a Master of Science, after a lifetime of working as a teacher.
Excellent, excellent. And it's Mary. It's brilliant to go. And I mean, anybody, I mean, I don't know how familiar people are with my background, but I left school at 16. I did do my leaving. I just, back and then, you know, sometimes you just went whatever time of year you were born. And I went to work like most people, like most girls in my class. Very few people actually went to university. And I raised my family, and I went to university actually the same time as my kids went to university when I was 42. And I would highly recommend it if you've never been. And I would say, don't be afraid of it. I was absolutely terrified. I thought, oh my God, here I am studying psychology. It's one of those high point degree courses, and I'm going to be in with all these geniuses, and I haven't been to school for whatever it was at that point, 25 years, or look, they haven't a patch on you. You know, life experience, you've raised children, you've dealt with real life problems, you've got mortgages, you know, all of that is way harder than an undergraduate degree, and you can run rings around them, to be perfectly honest, because you're actually interested. You know, I mean, the only thing I would say is just pick something that fires up your interest. You know, that's all that matters, is just that the topic interests you, because after that you'll just follow your interest, and it becomes easy, and we're prepared to work at it. We're doing something that we like, whereas actually a lot of them are much more concerned with partying and
yes, exactly. Or you're much more focused on what you want when you're a bit older. Sinead O'Hara says, what are your thoughts on meditation? Is it good for brain health?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's only so much I can kind of fit in. And in some of my talks, I do actually talk about it. Present-mindedness, you know, is absolutely, it's critical. A lot of our problems, you know, related to mental health, distinguishing from brain health being, you know, about your cognitive and how the brain functions, whereas mental health, we're talking about things like anxiety, depression, etc., is a consequence of us thinking too far ahead, worrying about things that might never happen, or thinking about things that have happened in the past, and we don't focus enough on the present. And mindfulness is all about that, about focusing on the present. And if we focus on the present, we're much more engaged, we get much more out of the present. Also, it's going to improve our ability to learn, to take in information, and to remember it, and to enjoy life. And yes, there is some research, you know, to support benefits of mindfulness in terms of brain function.
Kira asks, what are the effects of fasting on the brain?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I presume, are you talking, I'm actually doing an 800 fast at the moment myself, the 800 fast diet. Do you know what? I actually really need to look at it. I mean, the thing is, if you look at longevity and, you know, people in those blue zones, so say Okinawa in Japan, they definitely don't overeat, and they eat small amounts, and certainly they live longer, and they live longer in possession of their faculties. I can't point specifically to research, but I am actually going to look at it because I have been doing it. And I have to say, if anybody's interested, and this is not my expertise in any way, shape or form, but I gained weight during COVID, as I think everybody did. Oh my God, but I gained a lot, and I'm not somebody, you know, who really gains. But anyway, what I'm saying is I did the 800 fast diet. It's a Mediterranean diet, which I absolutely recommend for brain health. And it is a healthy diet. And again, it's that principle of, for the first 2 weeks, you just say eat 800 calories. But I mean, you don't have to count calories from green vegetables and cabbage and those things, which are all really good for your brain anyway. And then you do a bit of fasting. Anyway, I lost 4.2 kilos in 2 weeks.
Wow, that's fantastic.
And felt really good. You know what I mean? So not, but really still eating a balanced diet. Sorry for my long-winded answer. I suppose I don't actually know of the research, but I will look to it. But I don't see any negatives, provided your body is getting sufficient fluids, because your brain is very vulnerable to dehydration.
Well, I have a couple of questions here about food. Neil says, could you recommend some brain foods, please? Maybe blueberries. And Kira again says, what are the top 3 foods for a healthy brain?
So actually, what I won't do is recommend a single food, because it really is about, and I actually have made a little, I think, an animation that refers to that. So rather, instead of thinking like of a soloist, like a blueberry, think of an orchestra. So it is about, you know, that broader diet to ensure that you're getting the nutrients that you need. I do write in detail about it in my book, but the research suggests that a Mediterranean diet, so I would recommend oily fish a couple of times a week, avoid the red meat, and really just the lots of colourful fruit and vegetables. If you're vegetarian, you know, you can get the protein from the nuts, etc. Vegan is an entirely different thing, and you really would need to talk to a nutritionist to ensure that you are getting the balanced diet. I mean, really, it is that. And I mean, a Mediterranean diet is so simple. I mean, to be honest, you could group it into 3. Do you know what I mean? Your oily fishes, your colourful fruit and vegetables, and then actually, I suppose one of the key things is to use olive oil and avoid those trans fats.
Neil was asking about blueberries in particular. Is there anything magical about blueberries?
I eat blueberries every day. Well, the thing is, you will see single studies about, you know, a particular fruit or veg. But what I tend to do in terms of what I talk about and what I've talked about here is where there has been multiple studies, where they've been replicated, you know, so we'll find lots of single studies that will show this and that. And you have to remember, with science, there is a publication bias. So that means that a study that finds something significant is more likely to be published than a study that didn't find anything particularly significant. So you kind of have that bias. But I tend to step back from saying, you know, I know people talk about superfoods, etc. And I mean, you know, they're good for you. Berries are good for you in terms of fruit, because they've got, they're, you know, a lot of people will, when they eat fruit, they're eating very high sugar fruit. Whereas your berries, your blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, strawberries aren't as high sugar. And we really do have to watch, you know, the sugar levels, the insulin levels. We want to avoid getting type 2 diabetes. So the berries are the best choice on the fruit front.
Mark Matthews says, a great concise presentation this evening, very helpful reminders. And he says he spotted your lovely dogs. Do pets help cognitive function?
Well, they certainly give me something to smile about. Yes, I think there's one there. There she is. There's 4 around me actually at the moment. They're all one is on a sofa here beside me, and then I have another one here. They've been very good actually. They haven't barked. Yes, I would highly recommend that people get pets. It certainly helps with social isolation, I think. Yeah. My entire life world is in here at the moment, and they get you out of bed, they get you walking. You have to walk dogs. When you're out walking, you meet other dog walkers and you get to talk to other people and you have social engagement. You have to think about somebody other than yourself, which is important. And they really do. I mean, one of the things about smiling is when you're working from home, we tend to think those things are reactive. You need something to smile at or you respond to somebody, but we don't. So when you're alone, you actually have to kind of consciously make that effort. And the dogs, for me, actually do that. And the love is unconditional, it's wonderful.
No, I agree. I've got a dog and I think it's very important. And also, as you say, for loneliness.
Yes.
Very good.
Absolutely. It really is, because we all get lonely.
But also when you walk a dog, you talk to everybody on the beach. You talk to everybody you meet with a dog.
But that's the funny thing. I remember I was actually a man in Marks and Spencer's on the till one day, and I don't know how it came up, and he was talking and he told me that his dog had passed away, and I had said, "Oh, are you getting another one?" And he said, "Oh, I don't know, and I said, "Oh, but you must." And he said, "Oh, I just missed the chats, when I went out." And I said, "But you can still go walking without the dog." And he said, "Yes, I can, but people don't talk to me anymore. I'm not a safe human being because I don't have a dog." A dog
or a baby.
A dog or a baby, yes. And I believe for males, having cute dogs actually is a great...
yes, very attractive. Maria asks, is olive oil better than rapeseed oil?
Now, there's a good question. I actually can't answer that. I put my hands up when I don't know the answer, but certainly olive oil is what would traditionally be with the Mediterranean diet. But I can't answer that honestly. I put my hands up. I will look into it.
I got a question from Liz Kennedy, who couldn't listen today, but she can listen to the recording. She has a question about brain function during the menopause, and how can we get our brains to function better during this time, particularly in terms of memory loss and concentration.
Okay, and actually that's what my next book is about. Actually, it's brain fog. So I guess what she's talking about is the brain fog that we can experience during the menopause. I certainly experienced it, and but not just during the menopause, during times of stress, post-pregnancy, but also that kind of brain fog is associated with chronic inflammation or autoimmune diseases, depression, those kind of things. So and it's quite debilitating. And actually that's the special episode that I mentioned of Superbrain. I just put it up on Tuesday. It's actually quite like a documentary. I wrote a piece in the Irish Times this week on Tuesday in the health supplement. I know, Jane, you said we're all sort of COVID-19, we're fed up reading about it, but if you can find that online, or I'll share the link, it actually talks about the fact that people with mild or moderate COVID 4 and 5 months later are still experiencing brain fog, and it really can be quite debilitating, and it can be debilitating when you have it in the menopause as well, because it impairs even our ability to think about sequences. So you might even get confused when you're making the dinner. It can really impact. So what I would say is all of the tips that I've given for brain health will actually help to minimize brain fog during menopause. Of course, you have the added challenge during menopause where you might be having hot flushes that are preventing you from getting enough sleep, and that is sort of problematic. So it is about trying to to manage and balance those things. So with menopause, it's a combination probably of the fluctuating hormones, but also of disrupted sleep, impairing functioning, but doing the best that you can to follow just the general tips that I've given should help to minimize. And then actually, I probably have, no, I don't know. I was going to say I have tips, but actually I'm thinking that's what I actually have them in my book. I have a whole chapter of sort of the next book, you know, of sort of little supports that you can do to help if your memory's not quite working properly, you know, to help you through it. But that's not out till next March, so I'm afraid.
We'll wait for that one. If anybody has any questions, please type them through or put them in the chat box, because we might still have questions to ask Sabina. I wanted to mention to you Tony Buzan, who's a mind mapping guy and who I worked with quite a lot before he passed away last year. He used to say, you know, brain cells, alcohol doesn't kill your brain cells, because he used to love his wine anyway. Yes. He said you can drink alcohol, it's fine, because you can regrow new ones. Well, is that actually true? Because there's a saying that your brain cells start dying after a certain age, maybe it's sort of 18 even, or 20. But you're saying we can regrow them, which I think
we can, yes, but okay. So your brain starts to shrink at about the age of 30. In that, you do start 30, yeah. So we do start to see this atrophy, which is loss of brain cells and connections between them, and you lose about 0.02% of brain volume every year. But then that escalates then as you get to your 60s, and you know, exponentially then if you it sort of doubles then if you know, if you have something like Alzheimer's disease. So what I was talking about in the talk in terms of brain reserves is that you can actually, by living a brain healthy life and by challenging yourself, you can encourage, you know, and even by exercising, you can encourage the growth of new brain cells and the connections between them that will allow you to maintain your brain volume so that you don't actually have that atrophy from the age of 30. Mm. So what you can do is, so I mean, yes, what he says is true, but let's put it this way. If you're already losing brain cells, going around killing them is not a particularly good idea, you know. Yeah. And as we get older, you know, our brain is not as plastic as it was, you know, and I wouldn't be doing anything that you know, puts unnecessary challenge, you know, on your brain.
Yeah. Okay. Well, he was the mind map guy, so he felt that, you know, the mind map would help the firing of brain cells all the time, like your rainbow diagram, and which is
yes,
by the way. So yes. He was very passionate about that. Well, and Kira says, how many glasses of wine is it okay to drink per week? Well, I think you mentioned an answer to that earlier. How many glasses of wine is it okay to drink per week?
The Lancet Neurology says that excessive alcohol consumption, more than 21 units of alcohol a week for men, so I think it's smaller for women, increases your risk of developing dementia. Yeah. If you want the honest answer in terms of what's good for your brain, they used to say that a glass of red wine was good for your brain health. But a study, I think it was last year, large study looked at the relationship over 20 or 30 years on doctors' medical files between alcohol consumption and cognitive function. And it produced findings that didn't go down very well with those of us who drink alcohol, really, because it showed that essentially, you know, there is no safe limit. Basically what it showed was even people who only drink moderately, you know, or on the lower level, their cognitive function is not as good as people who don't drink any alcohol at all. So that is what it shows. So, I mean, it really is about balance, you know. And I mean, all I do and say is, in a sense, interpret the research, say what it shows. The decisions you make after that are yours, but at least you know what you're making. I mean, you know, you've got to balance it up with, stress release or socializing or whatever. But I do think, and myself included, I put my hands up there, we do not have a very good relationship with alcohol in Ireland. We don't consume it in the same way that people who eat the Mediterranean diet might consume it, you know. I mean, if you've ever been out, they may have a lovely glass of red wine, but they may not even finish that glass of red wine. Mm. Whereas we'll finish the bottle.
Yes.
And we'll even order another. So,
yes,
you know,
true.
yeah. But I think you know, I think, and I do say that in my book, 100 Days, you know, I mean, it is really about finding the balances, you know, for someone who's drinking alcohol and also smoking and not exercising and not challenging their brain and sitting in front of the telly all day, you know, they're going to be in a much worse position than someone actually who is exercising, challenging their brain, etc., and then has a glass in the evening to just help them wind down.
Yeah.
Do you know, so it really is down to that. The only thing I will say is when it comes to sleep, sleep is critical. A lot of us take alcohol to help us go to sleep, but it does have a sedating effect, which means sedatives do not induce sleep. It's kind of a misconception. Yes, you become unconscious, but you're not having the sleep, the restorative sleep that I'm talking about, the sleep that will help consolidate memories. And unfortunately, a lot of us will have alcohol, helps us go to sleep, but for the most part, then you'll wake up in the middle of the night, you'll need to pee because you had too much alcohol. Or, you know, it kind of leaves you tossing and turning. You're not getting the same quality sleep. So it is, again, related to that, you know, a glass with dinner and leave it with that. I'm not offering that as advice. I'm just sort of saying that, you know, not as close to bedtime as we would tend to do it.
Yeah, I agree. And you don't get the quality sleep when you're drinking anyway. So, yeah. I don't have any more questions. So if nobody has any more questions, we could end this session here. I have recorded this, so I will send a copy of the recording out to everybody who's registered with me, and then you'll have an opportunity to look at it again, and you can buy Sabina's book, 100 Days to a Younger Brain. So I think it just leaves it to me to thank you very much, Sabina, and we'll do another one at a future date.
Yes. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. I wish I could see you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.